progression for me. I really enjoy having staff, and I really enjoyed leading people. And then transitioning to the city architect role, I really enjoyed getting to lead vision, get some really positive impact on projects that that I think look really good and that the city will very much appreciate.
What are the biggest blind spots architects may have when it comes to understanding the owner's perspective? And what would you change about architectural education to better prepare young professionals for those realities?
It's hard to hear public dollars going into um, improving work quality, but I think it's very beneficial for the staff there to have a better work environment. It will make them better at what they do. I think the most important thing when I was leaving as city architect was to make sure that another city architect would come behind me. I didn't want to lose that role. That role was created.
All right, on this episode of the On Center podcast, we'll be sitting down with Kate Warpool, director at JS Held and former Indianapolis city architect. From shaping the built environment of Indiana's capital to helping owners navigate complex projects across the country, Kate has spent her career at the intersection of architecture, leadership, and public service. We'll explore what architects can learn from the owner's perspective, the realities of civic design, and what it takes to guide projects that serve communities for generations. This episode, of course, is sponsored by Map Solutions because before you can plan the future, sometimes you need an accurate picture of the present. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. We've known each other for a while.
Yeah.
So I won't take this as a favor, but no, thank you very much for being on. I appreciate it.
No problem.
You've led from inside city government as Indianapolis city architect, and now you operate nationally at JS Held, advising owners and institutions on complex challenges. That shift puts you on both sides of the decision-making table. One role shapes civic vision from within, the other evaluates, advises, and often untangles risk from the outside. How did your understanding of leadership and influence evolve between those roles? And what did you learn about power and accountability that most architects never see?
Well, I think at the city, leadership just kind of a lot of people who are leaders at the city, if they're put in by the mayor would appoint different leadership. So like deputy mayors and directors often, and sometimes deputy directors as well. They probably have a leadership background in other agencies that have come in to do that work. My leadership came in as administrator at the Department of Business and Neighborhood Services, or formerly Code Enforcement, when I started there. And I think that leadership structure is often kind of trial by fire. A lot of people are kind of gaining their feet under them when they're becoming leaders in those roles. And I had 10 years of being a leader at the city, and having staff transitioning into the city architect role and leading more kind of organizational health and overseeing, the design of the city. I didn't have direct reports, but in my previous job, I had direct reports. So the leadership styles that come from those two different roles, um, you know, I think for me was kind of a natural um, progression for me. I really enjoy having staff, and I really enjoyed leading people. And then transitioning to the city architect role, I really enjoyed getting to lead vision, and look at different policies and procedures that could help improve the built environment, but also just improve D&D as a whole when I was there. I think because I had my fingers in a lot of different, like, 2 different roles at the city, 2 different departments and then as city architect, I collaborated with so many other organizations within the city and outside. It gave me the ability to come into JS Held and lead there um, in a different way.
Mhm.
My leadership there became more of, how I could help clients with the connections I'd already had. And I think because I am a person who I just really enjoy people. I really like people. I like learning about them. This is how you and I, began to talk because I thought you were interesting and wanted to hear more
Oh,
about
thank
you. You're welcome. And I think that my leadership style comes from my genuine interest in people.
that's
And I
awesome.
think that's how everybody is. I think that's,
Oh, yeah.
you know, people have varying leadership styles and they are beneficial in many different ways. But mine is that I just really like connecting with people.
That's really
So
cool.
holistically, I think my leadership style has always been that way. And I've taken that from, leading a staff to leading vision at the city to helping lead clients into decisions that are the best for their projects and their worlds.
So your leadership style obviously involves getting to know the people that work for you really
Yeah.
well. Okay,
Yeah.
that's really cool. The second part of that question was, what have you learned about power and accountability that most architects never see from those two positions?
Well, I think that most people assume that it's a lot of um a lot of things that happen are about who you know,
Mhm.
and they assume that. I saw that in action, and I think it was all for the good, right? Like, a lot of people are trying to find ways to, um, make connections from one person to the other and help bring those up. So, I think leadership is about not leadership, that particular piece is about building relationships with people that you can leverage in the future,
Gotcha.
and keeping those contacts because you never know when you'll wanna see something happen, and you'll know the person behind that table just because you've met them along the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, is that something that you think would be beneficial to teach in college?
I think that every time I go in front of a class, in a university setting, they ask me what's something that's really important to do, and I tell people to build relationships and don't burn bridges. It's
That's
just a really those relationships are what will help you in the future.
Now, the last person I interviewed, Ashley Thornberry, who
Oh, yeah.
her episode isn't out yet, but I was asking her about this, and she said, they don't. One of the things she wished they taught more in architectural school would be the business side of things,
Absolutely.
and I think that directly correlates with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, the business side of architecture is definitely not taught in school, and I think there are efforts to build I shouldn't say it's not taught. Have you interviewed Dan Overby yet?
yeah,
Yeah, so Dan teaches pro practice at Ball State, which is that's where I went to school, so that's where I'm gonna kind of call back to, and I think that, his course in particular has really focused on helping students understand all aspects of the profession. I think that, like, truly running a business, since most architects, uh end up working in smaller firms at some point in their career or owning their own firm, uh, having that having that knowledge base, would be really helpful.
yeah.
And it's not intuitive and it's, not heavily taught. It's definitely focused on design and health, safety, and welfare related through, like, system structures, things of that sort. Those are things that are focused on, but that side part of understanding how to run a business,
Even if you don't intend to.
even if you don't intend to, because 'cause you're gonna work for somebody.
Yeah,
If you don't intend to run it, you're gonna work for them. It's better to understand how it operates.
makes sense. The title city architect sounds ceremonial to some, sounds important to me. But in reality, it carries real authority over standards, capital planning, procurement strategy, and long term civic investment. You were operating at the intersection of design, politics, and public accountability. So, what do architects in private practice consistently misunderstand about how cities actually make decisions about buildings?
Um, I think that from the outside, it can look like it's very slow. Even from the inside, it can feel slow. And I think from the outside, it appears like there's a lot of red tape you have to go through to make projects happen. Um, I wish people understood how hard the staff that has been doing the work for years and decades, how hard they work to really make as much happen as they possibly can. Um,
So,
I worked for 2 departments that have a lot of ordinance, a lot
mhm,
of law that governs what they do, and, I know that there are always controversial projects and things that are difficult, and I think that the public thinks that those staff have more authority than what they do sometimes to change those things, and they don't. Um, and I wish they understood how much people wanna see good things happen and make good projects happen. Um, that's what I saw when I was inside. But I think it can feel very slow, very red tapey, and like a lot of people are trying to um, hold organization, like just have like a power trip. And I don't necessarily think that's the case most of the time.
gotcha.
There's always probably somebody out there who's going to be frustrating for that sake. I also think that I wish that people in the like designers out there understood that a lot of the rules are in place for those who are the bad actors, and the city sees those bad actors and they kind of ruin it for everybody. And so that's a part that I try to help even now people understand. Like, I know these rules are hard to deal with, and sometimes they're not fun, but they're there because something in the past has happened that has made it more difficult, and they're trying to prevent that from happening. So I would say from the inside, that's what I always saw.
Sounds like a sharp contrast from the trope of a file ending up in a pile on someone's desk and forgotten about.
Yeah, I mean, and perhaps that can happen, but I think overall, you know, the city staff, they worked really hard. They really
Mhm.
cared about what they were doing, at least from the people that I really could see, and they really were trying to do a lot with very little. And I think that the city has done a really good job of trying to, you know, make like have people be paid more, but it's classically understood that if you're you know, working for the city, you probably don't make as much money as those working in the private sector. And, they work really hard to make things happen.
It's awesome.
So,
I'm sure
that was
they're
my
happy
experience.
hearing you say that.
Huh?
I'm sure they're happy hearing you say that.
Yeah. I mean, they do. They all work really hard. Um, so yeah, it was fun to be at the intersection, kind of when you were talking about being at the intersection of all those different places. I had the ability to kind of work cross departmentally, work with a lot of different agencies, and get to have impact in ways that I probably never really thought I would get to when I first started out my career. So,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Public architecture doesn't exist in a vacuum, obviously. It lives inside election cycles, budget debates,
sure.
community pressure, media scrutiny. In that environment, design excellence can easily become secondary to optics or short term cost control. How did you defend long term architectural integrity when political gravity was pulling the project in a different direction?
Yeah, I think I always just approached any conversation I had about a project, whether it was internal discussions or with external agencies, is what is going to have the biggest impact for the public realm. For everybody who's walking around the city, whether you live there, you're visiting, it didn't matter. If I was reviewing a project, if I had the ability to be a part of that review, um, then I was looking at it from the perspective of how is that average pedestrian who's walking by going to be impacted by this project. And I think when you really take it to that granular level, it's really much easier for people to understand the perspective that we were coming from.
Mhm.
It wasn't about it wasn't about anything other than that. That was always the point of view that we're coming from. And um, you know, political political influence, sure, there was always going to be some type of project that was being driven by the administration that was in effect at the time.
Mhm.
But even then, their interest was having it be a good public project. And so as long as I could help them understand that perspective, it was always like, okay, that makes total sense. So I think it was from a very practical perspective of how the pedestrian was going to be affected by that project.
Gotcha. So obviously not as hard as I just made it sound.
I mean, I think it's still always going to be difficult when you're trying to help convince owners to spend money in places that they maybe weren't necessarily thinking they should spend it. But um, I was always trying to be sensitive of what that cost would be and how that would impact the project. Um, Sometimes it was going to be a bigger hit than others,
Sure.
but I definitely was just trying to be like, you have to focus on this part of it because this is where people are going to intersect your project, not just the people within your building, but everybody from the outside.
Sure.
Um,
So forgive my ignorance. Is being city architect not too different from being an owner's rep in the sense that the city is the owner that you're representing?
yeah, that I would say absolutely
Mhm.
that it's a lot like being an owner's rep for the city. These are the rules and the ordinances we have. This is where we're going to come in and advocate for the public experience in a way that the owners of the structures weren't going to necessarily, if that wasn't their first and foremost interest. So, um, and for lack of a better term, authority that I had was over projects that were within the regional center. They were receiving city funding. They were coming in for variances. That was where my opportunity to provide comment and work with work with the design team and the owners that's where I had that opportunity. And, you know, so it wasn't every project that was coming into the city, right? If we were doing city projects, I would sometimes come and help advise on those, provide technical expertise for the departments when they didn't have that available to them, and try to help them, help advocate for, different like indie parks or anything like that on that side of it, to try and help them get what they needed. So,
Do you have a favorite project that you worked on as city architect?
oh my God, impact. I mean, I don't want to call any of them out. They were, but I had some really good moments where I feel like we did some we had some really positive impact on projects that, that I think look really good,
Mhm.
and that the city will very much appreciate. I was excited to be a part of like a lot of the big projects that are going on now. I was on the front end of those,
Oh, okay.
and so it's fun to see them coming up. The current city architect had the opportunity to come in and continue to flesh those ideas out and make sure good work happened. And I'm just happy I'm happy to have been a part of the front end of that work on a lot of those big projects that are happening now.
Awesome.
So,
Throughout your career, you've had the opportunity to see projects from perspectives that many architects never experience. First as Indianapolis city architect, and now representing owners and institutions through JS Help. Success isn't just about drawings; it's about budgets, schedules, stakeholder alignment, and delivering outcomes that serve organizations for decades. Looking back, what are the biggest blind spots architects may have when it comes to understanding the owner's perspective? And what would you change about architectural education to better prepare young professionals for those realities?
yeah, I mean, I think from the owner's perspective, and I think everybody can probably feel this, I hate to say it, but it is about meeting the budget and meeting the timeline. And we want a nice looking project, but it has to meet budget, and it has to meet the timelines that they are, working towards. And I think that's something that, we're kind of taught, and but I don't feel like sometimes it's fully ingrained. It's a dream to get a client that doesn't have a budget, but that's not something I've ever really had as a client that didn't have a budget. I know some designers get to work with that, and that's amazing.
But
But
that's a thing that exists.
it,
No budget
I think
constraints.
I think there are a few of those out there, but not necessarily something I've gotten to come up against.
Fair enough.
But understanding that side of it on any project, it's important to make sure you're following those particular pieces. Um, Other things I wish I fully understood, um, how 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 complicated, and I mean, I have inside knowledge of this, but how complicated making sure all of the permitting from all of the different agencies are followed, and the closeout for all of those different organizations, including utilities. Like, those are the things that are always going to be the hardest to, like, they're the hardest to get rolling, and they're the hardest to close out on the back end.
Really?
Mm.
That's one thing I didn't know, but
Yeah.
I'm not really involved in that
Yeah,
process.
a lot of
Not
documentation on that. But, that's, I mean, projects that I've gotten to work on, things like roads and bridges that maybe don't have as, like, that's a big piece of that side of things.
cool.
Yeah.
Municipal buildings are not just facilities; they are expressions of what a city values and how it sees itself.
Mhm.
During your tenure with the city of Indianapolis, you were shaping spaces that taxpayers fund and communities inhabit for decades. How do you balance fiscal responsibility with the belief that civic architecture should elevate culture rather than simply meet minimum requirements?
Boy, that's a tough one. Um, and my my inclination is to say yes to both sides. You have to do a little bit of both. You have to have some budget to help improve improve the experience and elevate the experience, and you still have to meet the budget because you were expending civic dollars. Um,
Is that one of the things you would consider minimum standards? A minimum standard would be meeting the budget or not exceeding the budget?
I mean, you have a finite budget, and so if you exceed the budget, you have to find the dollars elsewhere within
Sure.
within the city budget, and that's just not always the easiest thing to do, or you have to find federal grants or any type of other funding that you can pull in to help make it happen. Indianapolis does a lot of public-private partnerships on different projects, and they do it very well. Um, and it is why I think there are a lot of really successful collaborative projects that have happened in the city. But when it comes directly to civic spaces, I think that that's, you know, at the nuts and bolts of it is you have to be very cognizant of the dollars you're spending because they are public dollars. Um, so yeah, that's, it's a tough spot.
So elevating the culture has always been super important, but it's like how much can you do within this financial space?
Mhm.
Gotcha. That's rough.
It is hard. I felt I mean, just even the work environment, the city, you know, like working in the city county building, um, people either love or hate the city county building. In my experience, I'm a huge fan. I love the city county building. Um, it is old. It is over 60 years old now, and it is a beautiful international design building. And if you walk into the first floor, um, on the market side, it's obscured now by kind of the semicircle glass that had to be put in after 9/11. But there was this great grand staircase that still exists. You just have to look for it because
Seen it.
it's hidden behind everything. And there's the beautiful, I believe it's walnut kind of wood paneling that goes from the first floor to the second floor. That's kind of uh, sets apart the public assembly room and kind of those public spaces. And there's a really cool light fixture above that staircase that I love. And it was such a great design at the time, and times have changed and had to be morphed, and, there's all the security and everything that's tough. Um, but when I look back like, if I strip back all that extra, like, kind of noise and I look at the actual building, I still really love it. And I love that the walls are, kind of movable and, there's been a great, like, investment into the city county building to kind of like, a lot of the departments got brought back in. This was all happening as I was kind of exiting the city, but, I think it really is going to breathe new life into the city county building, and I'm happy to see that. A lot of the floors have gotten some much needed mild renovations to help make them more functional for city staff, and I know that it's hard to hear public dollars going into, improving work quality, but, I think it's very beneficial for the staff there to have
Sure.
a better work environment. It will make them better at what they do. Holistically, we've learned that as architects that your work environment really impacts how you, um, a workforce can really perform, and so I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited to see the city county building kind of still as that central, um, node for civic service in the city.
I would assume that would have some sort of ripple effect as well. Like, if the staff is happier, they have a better culture, then
That's
then that
right.
has a ripple effect that
Yeah.
ends up affecting anybody that has any dealings with that staff or what they
I
do.
think having a nice work environment and not like, when I first started in the city county building, you know, not all the work chairs worked appropriately. The desks were like kind of uh, a a variety of different options from different time frames. Some worked well, some didn't. Some were so old that they were beautiful vintage pieces now that you would, really wanna find in a salvage place, that were the people who had those really hung on to those desks
Really?
then 'cause they were a lot of fun. But, you know, just kind of the the mixed mashed everything that was kind of not working just made everything harder.
Mhm.
So I'm happy that they have a better environment because I think that it will help them just not worry about that part and continue to do the work that is needed to be done for their actual jobs.
Well, thanks. I was actually at the end of that question, or after when I thought you were almost done answering, I was going to ask you for an example. So thank you
Yeah.
for providing one. I think that's a great example. Public procurement is designed for fairness and transparency, but it can unintentionally compress creativity and discourage innovation. You've seen how RFQs and RFP structures influence design outcomes long before drawings even begin. If you could change one aspect of public procurement to improve architectural quality without compromising accountability, what would it be?
Um, I think that I think there's a lot of flexibility now in it, but when you really get down to proposals where it requires you to select the low bid, and you really I think have to justify if you don't use the low bidder. I think it'd be really great if there was a way to provide a matrix or something of that sort to help really um, show the quality of the proposals that come in so that you're getting the lowest but best choice, but
Sure.
maybe is not just the low bid. I think that that's something I'd like to see happen and may be happening if I'm being honest, but that I think was always, you don't want to just take the low bidder. Um,
Something that I've heard a lot, and please correct me because that's why I'm asking this question, is that the low bidder comes in as the low bidder, but by the time everything's said and done, they end up being just as expensive, if not more
I mean,
expensive.
I've not run the data on that. I'm sure somebody out there has, but I think it's an assumption that if a low bid comes in, you may have a case where you haven't like, there's one thing to be a low bid outlier,
Mhm.
right? Where I think that's an easy justification to not use the low bid, and I think that is something that is allowed, but I'm not 100% sure, so nobody come at me on that one. But if it's a low bid and you it's not an outlier, but there's maybe another bid that's not far off from that, but they've got a better quality submission, you know, it might be that staff would wanna go with that one,
Sure.
but they can't because they need to go with this other one, and it could be that they would, end up excelling the cost based on who knows, the things that they've missed in the proposal that was requested and if we're talking about actually, like, bidding for, like, constructing a building or something like that, there's change orders, so on and so forth, so
So what I'm hearing you say is something like that could happen, but it's not how things normally happen.
no, I don't believe it's
Yeah.
how it normally
You
happens,
haven't run that numbers, but anecdotally.
but anecdotally, yeah, I think it's easy to understand how a low bid could, skyrocket above something that is normal, so
Gotcha.
yeah.
Resilience and sustainability are now baseline expectations in public work, yet implementation often varies wildly from project to project. From your experience in municipal leadership and now consulting, what separates projects that simply use the language of sustainability from those that deliver measurable long term performance?
I mean, I think it all comes down to who the client is and what they really wanna do, right? I think to have real measurable success, you probably need to follow along, one of the many third-party certification platforms, because they will require measuring success all along the way, unless you have an organization that is really, in tune to measuring having those metrics measured.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think
Sure.
that's how you would say it.
That works.
But, measuring all those outputs to see where the actual, um, return on investment is and the long-term benefits of those different, uh, sustainability features and implementations. If you're not reporting to one of those third-party certifications, you may not be keeping up with those metrics. So,
Gotcha.
Dan Overby is your person on that, but I really do think that, um, that is that would be key to helping make sure all of those metrics are met. I would offer that any sustainability efforts that are put in is better than I mean, everything we're doing now is more thoughtful than what it was before. And so, um, it's just if you wanna take it to the next step, you really gotta follow those third-party certifications, I think.
Gotcha. Would you find that most people nowadays, I mean, sustainability is something they actually want, or and I don't want you to call anybody out, but are there some that just want to meet minimum standards and call it a day?
I mean, I think it depends on if who's this is not talking about city work necessarily, but just in general. Depends on who's using the building. If you're gonna run and operate the building for the long term, you want the sustainability features built in.
That makes sense.
If you're going to, build the building and you're going to sell it off or
Lease it out.
lease it out, you may not be as concerned about that unless it's part of your, like, base values. And so I think that comes down to dollars in the end. But holistically, I think people are interested in doing what's right by the environment as much as they can with the budget they have.
That's cool. That answered my question. I was mainly curious about the trend.
Yeah.
Really.
I think the trend is, people understand that we're trying not to, like, shred the environment.
All
But
right. Resilience. Speaking of which, resilience and sustainability. I just asked that question. See, I'm getting too involved in what you're saying that
Okay.
I'm losing my place. Um, when you transitioned from Indianapolis city architect into the private sector, it sparked conversations in the local AEC community about continuity standards and the long-term civic design leadership. Looking back with distance, what did that transition teach you about institutional momentum? And do you think cities rely too heavily on individual champions rather than building durable systems?
I think that institutional knowledge from within the city is heavily valued. So those individuals who've been there for a long time that understand the processes and procedures that have been built over time, and the cyclical kind of requests that come through, and how they've been approached in the past and whatnot. I think that all exists and is heavily valued. Um, I think the most important thing when I was leaving as city architect was to make sure that another city architect would come behind me. I didn't want to lose that role. That role was created when I was the first labeled city architect. There's been other architects who've worked at the city, but I'm not sure they've ever had that title. Um, and the role that I was playing within the department, I wanted to make sure that that role continued. Um, I also felt very strong, like, it was very hard it was a hard time to leave. I didn't necessarily wanna leave, but I wanted to make sure that, um, when you have people who stay for a very, very long time, um, I didn't want it to get I didn't want my ideas to get stale.
That makes sense.
I wanted to make sure that, whoever was in that role was excited and invigorated and was pushing things forward. And, you can spend a long time at a company and just start to not have the same enthusiasm, and I wanted to make sure that I left at a time that I was still enthusiastic
Mhm.
and that, we could bring in fresh enthusiasm.
Okay, so it's pretty intentional then.
So, it was very intentional, the timing. Um,
Did
and
they
so,
give you I guess a lot of room to help pick the new city architect?
I definitely provided some thoughts and recommendations, and, I'm very excited about who's in the role currently.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
and very excited about, that role I think is, expanding and adding urban design, holistically into the department. I think that that's an excellent move, and just thrilled to see, um, how she's, um, how she's leading.
Very
So,
cool.
yeah.
Many young architects assume leadership means being the lead designer. Yet much of your career is centered around on alignment, negotiation, and strategic oversight rather than drafting details. What mindset shift must an architect make to move from being a designer of buildings to being the designer of outcomes?
That's such a good question, and I think you go through school, and or at least when I went through school, I just remember thinking being a design architect was kind of the road. And I didn't get a lot of exposure to alternate career paths, other ways to be involved. It was kind of like you either go to a firm, you rise in leadership in that firm, or you start your own firm. Um, I'd heard of university architects. I hadn't really ever thought about working for the city. Um, just didn't have a lot of line of sight on how to lead in a different way.
Mhm.
Saw a lot of line of sight of how to lead within a company. And so I guess the way that I would prepare, kind of the next generation is I would say be open to opportunities, say yes to things that maybe seem like you don't want to do them, but why not try it? Um, that was a lot. I just said yes to a lot of interesting opportunities, and
No regrets?
no, and I mean, yes to things that my firm would ask me to do. Like, hey, do you want to go design this bridge? Sure. Do you want to become licensed in this area? Sure, I'll try that. And just a lot of different things led to my career of doing things outside of the norm. And then, I think when I went into the city and, you know, was looking at what's my next move going to be, I didn't feel a strong pull to go back into design because I felt like I could have an impact on other things. So I think a designer of outcomes is a really great way to put it because I do feel like I get a chance to help design outcomes and um, be an advocate for those who don't understand the profession as well as I do and construction as well as I do. So,
At least with that like overall high level view of many different disciplines.
mhm.
Very cool. So that kind of that more or less prepared you to be an owner's rep.
Yeah,
Like owner's rep is almost like the jack of all trades. Well,
yeah.
like in the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think the only side I haven't really fully sat on is the developer side.
Gotcha.
I don't know that that's a role that I will or will not go to down the road,
But you probably
later.
understand it well enough.
But, like, I can see it from all the different sides, and I really enjoy getting to work, with JS Held and getting to work with the clients that I have. There's a lot of great impact that comes from that. So,
That sounds like a fun perspective.
yeah.
For sure. Public institutions today operate in an environment of heightened scrutiny
Mhm.
and declining trust. Taxpayer funded projects are examined line by line. In that climate, what does the next generation of civic architecture need to do differently to rebuild public confidence and demonstrate value beyond square footage and budget? And if you want to, we don't have to focus on Indianapolis in general, but just what you've seen.
Yeah, I think that, you know, reminding, I think, the general public that most people working in the government actually care about what they're doing, which I think is sometimes hard for people to see. They care, they believe in what they're doing. Um, I would encourage the public to see that. And I would encourage those who are in public service to remind themselves that they're there to help people. They're so that was always a reminder for me. I'm here to help people. I like people. I want to make I want to make the city that I'm working in better. Right. So I think it's understanding that on those two sides. So the people working in public service know that, and the people working outside the public service understand that. Two, I would say make sure you vote. It's very important to vote. It's very important to be involved and understand what's going on in your town, city, state, but specifically where you live. That town or city, that's where you're going to have the most impact, and you're going to be able to see and feel the most change. So, be involved, understand what's going on, ask questions. I know the city of Indianapolis occasionally puts on the People's Planning Academy. It's a great way to understand planning. Usually, it's driven around an initiative that's getting ready to come about. I would encourage people to look if they wanna know more, look into those types of programs and offerings that are available. Um, I think it's about all, like, local jurisdictions trying to be more transparent and help people understand, and it's about people who are outside being willing to listen and learn and then provide constructive feedback. Um, cities don't run smoothly all the time. Most don't. In order to do that, you'd have to have an inordinate amount of manpower and dollars, and we all know that that's not the reality.
Sure.
Um, so I think just having the grace back and forth, and transparency is what's really important.
Gotcha. Now, obviously, there's nothing like this for JS Held, but is for the city of Indianapolis, since it is public, is there a place where the general public can go and just to see what the city's up to as far as building?
I mean, Indy.gov is a good place to start.
Okay.
It's kind of, I believe the website is kind of designed for you to ask questions in it as opposed to like really search engine.
Mhm.
So maybe a little bit more like AI and a little less like just your traditional search engine. Um, there are ways to get in there. Usually, each department has some general emails that'll come through. So maybe email those and ask for questions there, and people will try to get you to the right place. Keep asking. Those general emails are usually manned by a few different people on different days. Maybe not always, but again, nobody at the city come at me for saying the wrong things. But I think that's the way that you can really get in and understand what's going on. You can reach out to your counselor. Um, so Indianapolis has city county counselors. Every area has one. Reach out to your counselor, ask them questions. They'll get you to the right spot as well. Um, if you're having issues or things that you don't love, you can reach out to the Mayor's Action Center. Often they'll have things. I know that They get a lot of calls during pothole season related to potholes that are around. So that's always one way to do it. But those are ways to get in there. Look for anytime you're going to have a public meeting, anything like that. You can go and um, call those numbers, reach out to the individuals that are listed on those public meetings. So
Okay.
that's what I would say.
Maybe even participate.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
Awesome. I want to thank you very much for your unique perspective and experience.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of different people and we talk about sustainability and budgets, but I think you've got a completely different take on all of it. So I really appreciate it. That's all I have. So once
Thank you
again,
so much.
thanks for coming in.
No problem.